Okay, wonderful. Hey, I hope you're enjoying your food. We'll get this started. We have a wonderful panel today. My name is Nadav Kaufman, and I want to welcome you to the 7th annual ADLM Careers in Industry Luncheon. My role in my company is I'm the Vice President and Head of North America Marketing and Sales Enablement at Quidel Ortho, and I'm also a member of ADLM's Corporate Advisory Board. The Careers in Industry Luncheon is hosted jointly by ADLM's Corporate Advisory Board, the Society for Young Clinical Laboratorians Committee, otherwise known as SYCL, or SYCL, and the CLS Council. This event was developed to provide professional development and networking opportunities to early career professionals. The speakers here today, all 5 of them, will speak briefly to share their career paths, their expertise, and their experiences. Their talks will be followed by a Q&A session where you can ask plenty of questions, although I'll probably lead off with a few questions of my own. And then you'll have plenty of opportunity to ask in-depth questions of the speakers at the end in a networking format. So they'll give their talks, we'll have some Q&A, we'll ask you to ask questions, and then the speakers will stick around after the presentation for you to ask individual questions if you'd like. So first, I want to take this opportunity to thank each of these speakers for being here. They've taken time out of their schedules to prepare and to be here at this luncheon. Can we give them a round of applause, please? So to introduce our speakers, I'll start here immediately to my right with Brian Kelly. And I'm going in order of your handout in case you forget who's who, for your convenience. Brian Kelly is the owner of BNK Consulting, BNK Clinical Laboratory Consulting, LLC. Brian, hi and welcome. Thank you. Allison Kozak is the scientific liaison for medical and scientific affairs at Roche Corporation. Hello, Allison. Johanna Miller is global product manager for platforms at Quidel Ortho. Johanna. Laura Osborne, she's senior marketing manager for clinical lab systems, also at Quidel Ortho. And last but not least, we have Dave Scheinbob, who is the manager of healthcare advisory services at ARUP. Thank you all for being here. So with that, why don't we start with an introduction. I've asked each speaker to spend some time telling you about their career path, how they got to where they are, and really what were some of those twists and turns in their careers that might be interesting for the audience to learn about and to think about a potential move towards industry or consulting roles. So Brian, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's nice to be able to talk about my career and my journey that I've gone through. Sitting here today was never anything in my mind when I was a young clinical chemist, just finishing at University of Virginia back in 2012. At that point, I was board certified, but loved forensic toxicology, so I thought I should go into a forensics field. I got another fellowship in the forensics toxicology space. The person who hired me left by the time I started this. The new boss and I didn't see eye to eye. About a year, 15 months into the fellowship, I realized it was unsustainable, and I thought, boy, what am I going to do now? And this was 2013, and at that time there were opportunities for board-certified clinical chemists to direct small laboratories. And one of my colleagues said, hey, I know of a small pain management lab that needs a lab director. Would you be interested? And so I thought, okay, I'll have something going on. I won't be totally unemployed. And so I pivoted and went over to direct this small clinical laboratory. And at that point, I was exposed to this field that I didn't know existed, where there were companies that would hire clinical chemists to direct small laboratories. So I got engaged with one of those companies and worked with them for a year or 2 years and sort of learned how they did things, and I thought I could do it better. So I decided at that point I would broaden my wings and take a dive into owning my own business and starting my own business. And so at that point I started my own business and have been directing clinical laboratories ever since. Some of the career issues that I've faced in my time that are applicable are that what I started off doing as a laboratory director in mass spectrometry and toxicology, urine drug testing. It's no longer the hot market that it was 10 years ago. Now we're into molecular diagnostics. And as it turns out, when I was a fellow, I had a project and funding to develop molecular-based assays, so I had that to fall back on. I guess I tell you that because I want you guys to realize the experiences and exposure that you have now. You may not think it's useful, but maybe 10 years down the line, you'll realize, hey, this is really helpful. Some of the challenges that I've faced of being my own business owner are learning how to be a businessman. I was a scientist, and business. Sure, yeah. Some of the challenges I faced were learning how to be a business person rather than just a scientist. I never had any business training, but realizing that medicine can be a business, and there are people out there who are altruistic and they're totally for patient care, and there are other people who are out there who just want to make a buck. And learning how to navigate those relationships has been at times challenging, but as long as you stay true to your morals and ethics, it's relatively easy to make the right decision. Some other issues that I've come up with are regulatory-based and changing regulatory landscape, so you have to be abreast of what's out there, what's coming down the pike. The LDT ruling on the FDA and then the rescission was very challenging for small labs that I direct that have LDTs, and there's no way we'd be able to manage the compliance required to get our tests approved by the FDA. So that's sort of where I came from, and some of the positive things about being your own business owner is you're your own boss. You know, there's flexibility in this. I can work from pretty much anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and do my role, which is great if you have a family life that you don't anticipate initially. When I started 15 years ago, I didn't think I'd need to be effectively a stay-at-home dad, but I have a child with special needs, and so this allows me that flexibility to care for my kids while my wife is a full-time physician. So there are benefits like that. I didn't know if there's a question, sorry.
I'm sorry, Brian, how's the audio? Are you able to hear in the back? Not very well? Okay, I think we're trying to get the audio technician to come back. Yeah, but if you could talk louder and closer to the mic,
yeah.
it's probably the best.
Okay.
That's better.
Yeah, sounds better. Okay. So, yeah, there are lots of benefits. I love being my own boss. You know, I don't have to report to anybody other than myself, but then failures that you have in your own consulting business are all on you, too. You know, it's challenging, and it's at times very scary to launch a new business, but I would encourage anybody who's running up against a brick wall, fall back on what you know. You have expertise in various fields. You have knowledge that's actually valuable to other people. You may not realize it, but there was a company that contacted me because I had published an article, and they said, hey, we like what you do. Can you help with our consulting, or can you consult with us? So keep your
like first
feet
looking
in
at
the field
free chain,
and
or the Kappa free
continue to do good science. And if anybody's at all interested in learning about remote lab directing, owning a consulting business, I'm more than happy to chat after the session is over.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Brian. That's a really unique background, really going into your own individual business and striking out on your own. It sounds like you've learned a lot and become a very successful individual business person. And I love how you talked about the intersection of medicine and business, which is where you've landed. So that was fantastic. Okay, well with that, why don't we move to Allison and hear about how she landed at Roche.
Okay.
And probably speak very close to the mic. I'll tell you, last year audio was not an issue because there were only 6 people in the audience.
Oh, gosh.
And they were all right here.
Can you guys hear me okay? Louder? Is that good? Okay, great. I'm Allison Kozak. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I know it was kind of a big hike to find us way back here, and so it's super awesome that so many people showed up. I will just take a couple minutes to give you a little background into my career path, which I think was like a little untraditional for a clinical chemist. But I think a lot of people have the same experience when you have passion for the sciences. It's not always a very clearly defined career path, and I also think, I didn't know of all the opportunities out there, so I know that I'm very dedicated to helping other people learn about everything that's out there, and I had no idea what industry had to offer career-wise until I started working in industry. So I try to, make it my mission to help others learn about other options, both, within where they could be currently employed or explore options in industry and academia. So I've always been really passionate about sciences. I love chemistry. I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry, and then I was not sure really what to do with that once I was done with school. I didn't want to commit to a graduate degree at that time. I wasn't thrilled at the time of being a bench tech, so I kind of was at a standstill of what I was going to do. I decided to give business a try instead. I went to grad school to get my MBA in finance because I figured no matter what you did in life, fortunately or unfortunately, it's going to be controlled by the money behind everything, so it would be best to understand how that all works. So I did that and then worked in investments for a couple years and realized I really missed the scientific aspect of everything. Felt more, I guess, mature and ready to take on a graduate degree in the sciences, so I went back to school full-time to get my PhD in analytical chemistry. And then when I finished that, again, I was kind of at a stalemate of like, what do you do with a scientific degree? There really wasn't much direction from besides becoming maybe a postdoc or going to try to become an entry-level professor. And at that time, I think in 2007, the economy was really bad and there weren't many jobs to begin with. So I don't want to say that I fumbled, and I firmly believe that each opportunity will lead to the next, so I don't want people to ever feel discouraged where they are, because it's always amazing kind of how the next step's going to unveil to you from where you are. And as Brian had mentioned,
So having
little
patients
over-
actually look like the disease when they present.
a little over 10 years ago, pain panels with mass spec were really profitable
it's really
for clinical
important.
labs.
And it does impact your serum-free light
And so coming out, so I'm
ratio.
not sure where that's going.
Finally, the frequency.
Sounds like our microphones might be picking up another presentation. So if you could just drown them out, that would be great.
Okay, I'll keep going. I'll power through. So anyway, because of the pain panels that started about 10 years ago, 15 years ago in the clinical labs, a lot of hospitals didn't have the toxicology and mass spec expertise, and most of the lab techs didn't know how to bring up mass spec. So I ended up going to work in a clinical lab. First time I had ever really heard about working in a clinical lab. I came in as the mass spec person setting up drug confirmatory testing. And then, I kind of fell in love with the clinical lab, worked my way up in the clinical lab, sat for my boards in clinical chemistry, and then went on to be medical laboratory director, and did that for a while. Had never thought about industry, and then there was just a position that ended up opening up in the Midwest. I'm based in Cleveland. So there was a Midwest position that opened up with medical affairs with Roche. I didn't know anything about medical affairs, but I saw the job listing. I didn't know anyone at Roche. I know that's kind of unheard of to just apply blindly to a job and end up getting it, but I encourage you all to try it because I know industry is always looking for people. And I ended up taking the job. I've been there for about 5 years. and I work in the non-commercial area of Roche in medical and scientific affairs. So we focus on mainly we call them the 3 E's: education, engagement, and evidence generation. So we, of course, had to follow the priority areas for the company of where they're focused. But we help educate labs, we help educate clinicians. As of right now, Alzheimer's biomarkers are a really big area that we're very dedicated to.
More studies.
Dedicating the, sorry, I keep hearing the other conversation.
Thank you very much for your time.
During COVID, especially, I felt super valued because I was able to talk about and educate labs and clinicians on what to do with all the different, do they want to use PCR testing? Do they want to use antigen testing? When's it appropriate to use antibody testing? So even though it's different than working in the lab, it gives you almost a broader platform to still be able to help people on a daily basis and connect with people, both in the lab, clinicians. We do a lot of work with patient advocacy groups with education, and then also, finding gaps in the diagnostic guidelines and helping produce the evidence that's needed to drive the needed intended use of and expand the intended use of diagnostics that already exist, and also, the whole scientific exchange that we have with customers and with key opinion leaders across the country. Finding out what they need, like what diagnostics are missing, what's not working for them with the diagnostics that are currently available, and then we can take that information back to our research and development people and really help formulate pipelines that actually are what the U.S. market needs and what the patients need. So that's a quick background into how I got here today, and I really appreciate the time.
Wow, thank you so much, Allison. I wrote down a couple things as you were talking. That you were an investment banker, is that right? But you were involved in investments. Okay, that was a quick detour from the lab. But what I love, a couple of things you said just apply, and I really want to stress that. Industry is always hungry for smart people who are interested. And sometimes industry goes out and looks for people and says, hey, we met you in your lab, we'd be interested, would you be interested to come on over? But many times, when applicants from the lab come to industry, that's a gift. So very much love how you put yourself out there and just applied, and clearly it really, really worked out, right?
No, and I mean, I can't say enough, even if you see someone speak at a conference, or you just see something interesting read something interesting about someone, just reach out to those people. They'll be very open to have a conversation with you about your interests, and you just never know what's going to turn up from it. You just have to be very open and just willing to make those connections with people, which, I know is hard to take that first step, but you just have to do it. And then once you start doing it, it becomes easier, I promise.
That's great. The other thing I took away was your point on non-commercial, right? So industry is fundamentally a commercial entity, right? Industry makes things and sells things to those who need them to support healthcare. However, there are many, many commercial jobs in sales and marketing and customer support, but there are many, many non-commercial jobs, right? And you entered in a non-commercial way, right? You've never been asked to sell anything in your career, and you're deeply tied to the science. And there are certainly many, many roles like that, and some people cross over and might go back and forth, but important to note that there are commercial roles and non-commercial roles as well. Now, another entry point for industry that's non-commercial is really R&D. And so our next speaker, Johanna, really started in industry in R&D as an engineer. Is that right, Johanna?
I did, yeah. Yep.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Johanna Miller. Let me just make sure. Hi, everyone. I'm
Still
Testing. I know. Just feel like it sounds good for a second, and then. Yes. Hi, everyone. So my name is Johanna Miller, and I entered this industry after I got my bachelor's in biomedical engineering. And I started working at Quidel Ortho as an R&D engineer. So kind of very much behind the scenes from the laboratory, right? We're designing new analyzers And I would do a lot of kind of like Excel or MATLAB-based analysis on just, hey, we ran an experiment, did it pass? If not, why? Run follow-up experiments, that sort of thing. So very, very analytical focused, I would say very interesting. And then, let's see, after a couple years, I kind of kept getting bigger and bigger problems, and then I kind of got tired of my computer crashing. So, I'd open Excel, we're trying to analyze this big data set, and it would crash because we're trying to analyze too much. So I decided to go take some classes in data science. Originally, it was just, hey, let me just take one course. But then, I turned it into a degree because I liked it so much. And then I kind of became, I don't know what you call it, like the analytics person. So anytime we had to do like a large study at Quidel Ortho, or I would investigate, if there was some sort of question, I would, pull customer data. We have a very large cloud database, and I would do the investigation to understand what was happening. And so that was, again, very interesting. I was happy to evolve in that way. And then it started into doing proactive studies. So I have myself and my colleague, we have a publication where I took data from customers and analyze sigma metrics that are seen, for all of our various products, right? So I had the opportunity to publish, and then I had an opportunity. Actually through Nadav connected me into the global marketing role, which is product management, and so that's opened up a whole world of opportunity for me to have a closer connection with customers. Because I'll say I was kind of behind the scenes for a long time, and sometimes I'd be analyzing data and I have to chase down a person who could tell me what I was looking at, or who could tell me what it meant. In the real world, what does this trend mean? And so that's kind of my message here, right? Is that all throughout an organization, like a commercial organization, even say the R&D or product support or investigation, right? Having that customer knowledge is so valuable. So I'm not going to say, I'm very happy with my career not coming from the lab. It wasn't a detriment to me, but sometimes I imagine how much more effective I could have been my entire career if I just had that firsthand experience. So I get that now through, I interview laboratorians, I visit laboratories, because it's very, very important to understand what the data means, how to interpret it, and now as I'm making decisions about our products, right? Is this feature more important, or is that feature more important, right? That's product management is certainly a role that a laboratory might. My boss came from the lab, is what you know what I mean. It's if you have lab experience, no matter you. Think about it as you could go and get a second degree in anything, software engineering, an MBA, anything, and your lab experience would carry you, because now you have that insight that other people don't have, right? So, throughout, even the R&D organization, we have people that came from the lab, and, in meetings, when they say, oh, no, that's not going to work, right? That's a workflow problem, or no, this is an important issue that we need to focus. People listen, right? Because you have that experience. So even R&D, I've worked with people from manufacturing who have lab experience, right? They bring so much to the table, and that's really the message that I have, right? I mean, even just the fact that you have the job that you have, right? You can bring that experience, right? I mean, everyone uses a phone or drives a car, right? I'm sure GM has plenty of people that can, but laboratory companies, it's a very specialized skill and experience. So let me see what else I have on my notes. Yeah, so it's because at the end of the day, what I found is that all throughout, my company and organization, everyone wants to do the right thing or make the best choice or the best design decision, but the people from the lab are the ones that give us that information and that insight. So, you could be a clinical assay scientist, right? Designing new assays. You could be on the team that designs new platforms. There's a lot of very exciting, very technically challenging, very interesting roles available all through. I'm sure I'll speak for other companies, even ones I haven't worked for, right? I'm sure all the big companies have roles like this. So when you're applying for a job or looking for a career change, don't discount sort of R&D, don't discount manufacturing, don't discount, validation, all of those types of roles. I can speak from personal experience that if you have a laboratory perspective, you would bring a lot of value to those roles. So yeah, I think that's my my message. Thank you.
That's a great message. Thank you, Johanna. And I love that you talked about your pivot to data science.
Yeah.
And if there are any data scientists out there, I promise you, industry is hungry for data scientists.
Yes, absolutely.
Number one. If you're interested in pivoting to data science, I recommend that because industry is hungry for data scientists. So there's lots of opportunities there. I also love how you mentioned, that you can go back, no matter what background you come from, and get an advanced degree and pivot your career.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Including in engineering or other fields. And I think, our next speaker, Laura, right? You went back and got, you were focused on your BS in med technology, right? And then and had quite a path that was both in the lab and in industry, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So I'll try to speak up here. Hi, everyone. My name's Laura Osborne. So Senior Marketing Manager of Clin Lab Systems, our Vitros portfolio at Quidel Ortho. And I actually am gonna start with the takeaway. I think just listening to some of my colleagues up here, I think and we have some similarities, but the difference in my was I knew pretty early on that I wanted to pursue an education in laboratory diagnostics. Like most of us probably that came out of the lab, it started with wanting to make an impact on patient care, right? Bringing some caring for people, caring for others, right? So I would argue to say that maybe all of us who went into laboratory diagnostics for our educational goals, that was our drive, right? And I think that takeaway is we need individuals with that passion across the industry, whether it's in the laboratory or on the commercial side, right? Because we see the evolving way that healthcare is changing into more of a business model. And if we don't have those individuals at the table, then we could be losing some of that focus on patient care, right? So none of us want that, right? That's why we go into industry. So going back to my path, I'll just shed some light. So I graduated with my degree in medical technology at Michigan State University. Any Spartans? No green? No what? Go green, go white? Okay.
We got a couple.
They still have a fantastic medical technology program and clinical laboratory science program. So I'm happy to see those programs trucking on. It was a fantastic education. Then I spent a year doing my clinical rotations as a generalist medical laboratory scientist at a level 1 trauma center in Metro Detroit. So that was exposed me to another great curriculum. We saw a lot of diversity in the patients we were caring for in the laboratory. So I spent about 5 years dedicated to transfusion medicine after completing my ASCP credentialing and certification maintenance, which I do keep up with today. So that time in transfusion medicine, that was my favorite area of the lab. I think it was just, you really had that impact, again, on patient care. So it was a passion that was kind of in front of me, but I needed to go through some trials and tribulations to realize that, I think. So from there, I started getting a little more curious on the business side, so went back to school for my master's degree in health services administration. In that time, I had relocated from the Detroit area down to Austin, Texas, just out of exploring and kind of that curiosity that kind of kept me going and kept me energized. So down in Austin, Texas, I worked for another a medium-sized hospital down there. Did more generalist work, so it was really interesting to get back into other areas of the laboratory. And meanwhile, finished my master's degree in healthcare administration. During that time, though, I would say that is when, being curious on the business side of healthcare, I started kind of opening doors or looking for opportunities to get to know others at the hospital I was working at that were in some of those roles, right? The lab director, sure, we had a great relationship, but we also had our COO. There was an associate COO program. for Chief Operating Officer, and I just asked her to go to coffee. Right? I wanted to learn what do you do in this role? How are they kind of grooming you for your next steps in your career? And that got me in front of some job shadowing opportunities. So I thought, hey, maybe this is the route, ACHE route of, kind of more of the healthcare executive pathway. So there was opportunities to shadow in the C-suite as well as in a physician relations manager role for our hospital, which was interesting. It had to do with recruiting physicians into the hospital. And then once they were recruited by the hospital, it was also helping their families become acclimated to the Austin area, which it sounded really cool. But in doing that shadowing, I realized this pulled me too far away from the patient, and that's where I drew my passion. So it kind of came full circle of this, I need to stay close to that, to what is happening in the laboratory and the hospital on the patient side, because I needed to be close to that passion, right? To do what you do every day, getting up and going to work. So that took me back to the laboratory, where I had some really nice relationships with my vendors that were coming into the laboratory, and including at the time Quidel Ortho. However, my first opportunity was with ImmuCore on the transfusion medicine side of the business. So just having that relationship with my vendor at the time, she really helped me open up some doors there, right? To have some additional conversations. Similar to Allison, I really never explored too much on the commercial side of the laboratory. But as I learned more and got to have some conversations, I applied myself to a business manager position in South Texas at the time, and it was thankfully I was I was able to fall into that role. They saw my potential, thankfully, and it was a great move. It was not only was I still close to laboratory diagnostics, but it was a move where I could stay close to my colleagues in the field, but get to see the way different hospitals ran, right? There are different needs that they need fulfilled, and it was really, it opened my mind to, how we are all in it together, and having the background in laboratory medicine, it translates into so many different realms. Right, so I had spent about 3 years as a business manager for South Texas. I later, I guess I was doing pretty well, so they gave me the full state of Texas and Oklahoma for a while, which was a lot to cover. From there, I went into marketing. It afforded me an opportunity to be a little closer to home, starting a family. So again, staying curious and doors opening up. To meet you where you are as well in your personal life. So I stepped into marketing in 2018, so about 7 years ago, with ImmuCore, which has now been acquired by Werfen. So held that role for about for a number of years, about 2.5 years before, and that was all, of course, on transfusion medicine. So that was their platforms, their systems in transfusion medicine, as well as some of their molecular testing for our red blood cell genotyping. So very exciting, very heavy in transfusion medicine. So I kind of had that itch of, I missed the rest of the laboratory. How do I get my hands on other areas of the lab? And at that time, I had again, keeping doors open, asking people for coffee, just reaching out. I had some colleagues, friends over at Ortho Clinical Diagnostics at the time, and had reached out and was able to move into a role in marketing with Quidel Ortho back on the chemistry side. Right, so I've been here since 5 years, and there are still countless opportunities. I encourage anyone who's interested, feel free to, I'm available to speak, or feel free to go onto our website. We have plenty of jobs open as well. I'll use this as a plug to recruit, whether at marketing, sales, field application specialists, and whatnot. So thank you.
Great. That's fantastic, Laura, and I love how you talked about just going on the website, and I would encourage people, go on the career websites not just if you're ready to apply to a job. Go on the career websites to learn what qualifications companies are interested in and let that guide some of the next steps in your careers, right? You can set your sights on particular roles, get to know exactly what companies are looking for, and you'll see some differences between companies, but honestly, they're not that different because we're all getting our job descriptions from ChatGPT, right? So they're like all the same now, right? They're all very similar. You will see the commonalities, I promise. And you can enter through, as you mentioned, directly into a sales role. For those of you who may not know, business manager is translation for sales representative, right? We like to give our people important titles. But there's also the FAS role, the field application specialist, and many people come in from labs into companies as field application specialists. From there, they have fantastic careers as FASs, or they may progress, some of them into sales roles, some into other different roles within the company. So, we thought as we structured the panel today that it would be really important to kind of bookend it with consulting on both ends. So we have Dave Scheinbob, who is also very involved in consulting, like Brian, but I think in a little bit of a different vein, right?
Yes, yeah, I'd say so. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Scheinbob. I'm the manager of healthcare advisory services at ARUP. I guess my career journey started in undergraduate at University of Utah. I think like many undergrads, I didn't have a very clear idea of what I wanted or even what I wanted to major in. I liked nature, so biology sounded good. And then I like to joke I never saw the outside of a lab again, at least for work. All the action in biology at University of Utah was molecular and biochemistry. So I gained some great research experience in my undergrad time. Although I also learned that research really wasn't for me. I recall I spent one summer really putting in a lot of hours in the lab working on something, and at the end of that summer, my PI said, "That didn't really work out, did it?" and I'm like, that's I guess that's the ups and downs of research. But as my time in undergrad ended, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, except that I knew I didn't want to go to school anymore. I was ready to get a job, basically. And the career counselor at University of Utah told me about this company called ARUP. And she said, they're hiring science grads, and you can work 7 days on and then have 7 days off. That's a schedule they offer. So as a 21-year-old who loved to spend all my time skiing and biking and rock climbing, I was like 26 weeks off a year sounded pretty good. So that was my intro into ARUP. And I enjoyed the work, I enjoyed the schedule, I enjoyed that I accomplished something every day in that kind of production lab environment, as opposed to that kind of lost summer I had in research. And as time went on, more opportunities became available. ARUP had, even 15 years ago, had a great training program for four-year science degrees to get them certified as categorical technologists. So I took advantage of that, became a categorical technologist in chemistry, and moved into some of our technical specialist roles. I worked in some of our manual chemistry or manual endocrinology departments, then moved over to HPLC and mass spec, which I really had a passion for. Certainly at that time, if you asked me what a career in industry was, it would have been field service engineer, field application specialist, liquid handling maybe. And I still could be happy, I think, tinkering with HPLCs and mass specs indefinitely, but that's not where I ended up. So I became interested in management, moved up to our lead tech position, and ultimately supervisor of one of our chemistry testing sections. Around then, I became interested in business. A lot of the decisions we make in the lab, lots of capital, lots of staff that you're choosing to hire, tests you're choosing to launch, and I really wanted to know how that worked. How do you know if this is a good decision or not? How does it make sense? That led me towards the MBA program at the University of Utah. So I got my professional MBA, and in the course of that, I think like many MBA programs, we did a lot of case studies, and that's where I began to learn what consulting was. Many of those case studies are written from the perspective of a consultant, and all of a sudden that seemed like very interesting work. Project-based, you kind of get dropped in somewhere and have to figure things out fast, and then you kind of move on to the next thing, which has an appeal to it as well. So again, very luckily, as I was wrapping up that MBA program, I started talking with some of our business development people at ARUP and learned that we had a consulting team. We had a group that was really focused on working with ARUP's customers, which are all hospitals and healthcare systems, kind of helping them either with lab stewardship initiatives, aligning testing between multiple locations, growing a lab outreach program, operations improvements. So that was very interesting to me. And I know someone mentioned an informational interview, just sitting down with and talking with someone, even if there's not a job open or you're not even sure if that's what you want to do. And that's certainly what got my foot in the door on the consulting side at ARUP, was just talking with the manager of that department. And when a job did come open, some period of time later, I was able to get it and join that team. So that's been another learning curve that continues to this day. As I mentioned, I was kind of all in specialty chem labs at ARUP, and now we're working with customers with general hospital labs or larger laboratories that have all different kinds of specialties. So that allowed me to really broaden my knowledge base and learn a lot about other areas of lab medicine. And I continue to love the project-based kind of continual learning aspect of that work. And I've been doing that for about 8 years now. When I moved from being a supervisor to joining that team, I went from having about 25, 30 direct reports in my laboratory section to going back to being an individual contributor as a consultant. So it's interesting to have gone back and forth in that way. And then about 4 years ago, I became the manager of this team. So I have about 10 consultants as part of our group now. Very different types of management experience. And, I guess the other thing I'd say is certainly as I was starting my career, I never thought that I was maybe a people person isn't the right word, but I never thought I was comfortable, talking to people as part of my work. I was very much into doing bench work and tinkering with instruments. And then as time's gone on, it's been very rewarding for me and kind of eye-opening to realize that I can make sales pitches. I can, talk with customers and have those sorts of, kind of people-oriented roles that I don't think I would have thought were right for me, when I started my career 18 years ago at ARUP. And that's another thing I think to keep in mind. A lot of us come from the lab, come from a science background, and some of us really, maybe that's where we want to be, but I think there are a lot of opportunities out there, and it's going to be horrible and uncomfortable, the first time you got to be in front of people giving a presentation, but it's a skill like anything else, and you can get better at it and get comfortable with it, and even come to love it, even if it's something that right now might seem kind of terrifying. So, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, that's great, Dave. And I love how you moved back and forth between individual contributor and manager and back to individual and then manager. And I think it shows some of the flexibility. And I think it sounds like ARUP is maybe not 100% unique, but somewhat unique in that you're able to have really a laboratory career where you progressed in roles in the lab, but then moved to more of a consulting, industry-oriented kind of role. Which I think is very special. And you may find that in larger organizations, that they have many, many different arms. You may be surprised to learn that, in fact, several of the distributors in the clinical lab industry in the US also have consulting arms, where they help stand up and help support laboratories. So you see those in other places. Okay, so we are actually tracking just right on time, which brings us to our Q&A part of the program. I myself have a number of questions I would love to ask, but before I ask mine, why don't we turn to the audience and see if there are some burning questions that we want to start asking. And can I just ask, is there somebody from ADLM that can help run the mic to anyone who's got a question? Otherwise, I'll just repeat it if I hear. Who's got our first question? Oh, I think we have our first question.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. So I'm a lapsed med-tech from 25 years ago, and I'm just curious for the panel here, when you're talking about new technologies coming through, if you crystal balled it 15 years, what's going to be the department that's got the biggest presence and the biggest financial sort of leverage that you see coming through?
Anyone?
I don't know. I'll take some of that. But I'm a little biased because I'm very involved with our automated mass spec coming out with Roche. You know, I think, I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I think everything is going to go to one extreme or the other. We're going to keep improving near-patient care testing, and then we're going to keep making very specialized testing like mass spec and other technologies like that more accessible. So I feel like eventually it's going to be one extreme or another like that we're going to see as the technologies keep advancing. And then, of course, anything that has to do with AI, I can't even imagine where we'll be in 10 years with you know, interpreting data sets and stuff. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, a trend that I see is just staffing struggles that laboratories have. And so I think any technology that can improve a workflow, that can save time, reduce staff needs, is gonna really be successful for laboratories.
Yeah, that was going to be where I was going to go to, Johanna. It's all around staffing, right, and improving the workflow efficiencies, really, right. And I see it. I mean, that is also where I think individuals that come from the laboratory and industry, that's important, right? Because to get our career path out there, right, to bring laboratorians in, because we are always going to need laboratorians, right? But we just need to help them do more with less, right? You see it all over the exhibit hall, doing more with less. That's you know, the truth.
That's great. Thank you all. Next question, please. Come on, I know they're out there. Here we go.
As someone who only has a bachelor's degree, what's your advice on how to compete with people with advanced degrees, especially when many companies won't consider you for high-level positions unless if you have some kind of advanced degree, even if you do have the technical expertise and experience to back it up?
It's a great question because I think 3 or 4 of our panelists all got advanced degrees, right?
Yeah.
I think just about everyone.
And you know, that is a great question. Just one comment, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues. As we were speaking up here, I personally think it's not, you don't need to get the advanced degree. You don't need to move across the country necessarily, right? With that, a lab diagnostics education, you know, it can still take you far given the right, I guess, applying certainly for the right opportunities, but having the right conversations. It's an invaluable education to bring into so many, as we've talked about today, areas of industry.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so there's 2 approaches, right? You could network, right? Certainly that's, you know, those informational interviews, having those conversations, forming those connections. The other piece of advice would be, you know, enter the company in a position you do qualify for, and then have them pay for your advanced degree, and then move that way. So, yeah.
And I'll add that certain regulatory environments require advanced degrees. So in some cases, you might be the wonderful candidate, but you may not meet a CLIA requirement or a CAP requirement to hold a certain role, so that might get in the way.
Yeah, but I think, you know, Johanna, your point is find the right entry point. There are many entry points in companies, and I'll also give you the secret that many people don't know is when you read a job description and the requirements, take very close note of what they say is preferred versus required. Yep. Right? If it's preferred, that means nice to have. We'd really like it, but we'll look at strong candidates without this. If it says it's required, that means it's mostly required. Right? And even when it says it's required, you know I can speak for our company. If we see a strong candidate that doesn't have that qualification, I think we'll still consider, right? And we'll do some soul searching to say this candidate's amazing. Is their lack of degree really the thing that's going to stand in the way? But absolutely find the right entry point, because there really are many.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on your point, Nadav, if you're just applying through like a website and you don't have that minimum requirement, the like AI HR software is going to reject you. So if you're trying to be the one that's a strong candidate who maybe doesn't check all the boxes, you'll have to network like personally. So an event like this, you kind of have to get around the HR filter, because otherwise, like someone like myself or Nadat would never see your resume. So just kind of be aware of that, right? It's just automated filters, so you have to go around it through that way.
Yeah. And we may have mentioned it before, but I really want to make sure to highlight, there are individuals from many, many different companies that call on every lab in America, right? Every one of the chem and IA customer companies are probably calling on your lab. You probably have a hematology, vendors calling on. You probably have urinalysis, and et cetera, et cetera. Those are great entry points. Find those sales representatives. Tell them you're interested in finding a career in their company. Have them start working for you. Because right now, remember, you have the relationship. You're their customer, right? They're interested in building a relationship with you as well. And generally, people are very interested in having people want to join their company. And I'll also point out that many companies have referral bonuses, right? So if you talk to Johanna or Laura, and they provide your resume and say, hey, we really need to look at this individual, and you get hired, they're going to get some sort of monetary referral bonus. And you'll probably find that at a lot of companies. So if you work through the sales representatives, I think that's a really good entry point for the networking that Johanna referenced.
Yeah, and just quickly, I can't stress enough, especially in industry, you want to make sure that you make it very clear in your interviews and have like really strong examples of that you're a team player and you're someone who's easy to get along with. Because I've seen so many interviews in industry where people come in, and I'm telling you, like actual people that I see on the posters in the hallways here interviewing for positions, and they're so difficult to deal with. Like, we're just not going to hire them because no one wants to deal with that every day. And I've seen people with bachelor's degrees beat out people in interviews of people that are actually on the big posters hanging in the hallways, because at the end of the day, industry is much more practical in ways than academia and even hospital work. Like, if you can't get along with people, like no one wants to work with you, period. Like, they're not going to give you special treatment for anything. So just make sure to set yourself apart, like that you're a team player and you're fantastic to work with and be around, and it will go so far. It will go so far.
That's a great point, Allison. Thank you. Good. What other questions are in our audience today? All right, while you all are thinking of more questions, I'm going to ask one, and I'm going to ask the panel to speak a little bit about work-life balance. And it struck me today, I was in our booth, and one of our sales managers who leads a sales team and has a very intense job with a lot of travel, she said, I think I just want to go back to the bench. I want to walk in at 7 in the morning, walk out at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and leave leave the work in the office. And she was half joking and half serious. And the reality is that depending on your job and industry, work-life balance can be an issue. And I think that's really important to recognize. It can involve a lot of travel, it can involve long hours, it can involve time away from home, and which is very different than working in a lab on a daily basis. And so I wonder if the panel can speak to a little bit of their experience in their roles and what sort of work-life balance you have or how you've managed it.
You want to go first?
In different roles. Doesn't have to be the role you're in now, yeah.
Sure. So I would say in my experience, the work-life balance has been pretty good. In general, it's like business hours, right? 9 to 5, 10 to 6, whatever. But in full transparency, there are like seasons, or if there's a big presentation you're preparing for, or a big deadline you're trying to meet, then you work hard. But I haven't really experienced like a full, pressing the gas pedal for months and months and months and months. It's more of like a temporary push in my experience.
Mm-hmm. I think work-life balance is really interesting, and it's very personal. What you're looking for. As you just mentioned, there's some people who really want, maybe they want that regimented kind of predictable schedule. I know for me, I do a moderate amount of travel in my current role, and to me, I for the most part enjoy it. I feel like I kind of thrive on a bit of variety, and that's I get that both from the consulting work itself and from going out to visit clients and kind of having my schedule look a little different from week to week. So I think some things that I find to be a perk of my job, others might find to be, a minus if they want a more predictable schedule that doesn't involve travel, for example. I'm lucky ARUP is very good on work-life balance. I do think I probably have better work-life balance now than I did as a supervisor of a technical section, and that was a defined hours job with almost no travel. But when you have 25 people reporting to you and you're running a 24/7 lab, you're getting calls on the weekend. Sometimes when you're going in on that Monday, it's going to be rough because people have been there all weekend and things didn't go very well. So it's not just about hours and it's not just about schedule. It is also about, what kind of work are you doing, and then like what causes you stress personally and what doesn't. And I think there's some things about my job that people would find stressful that I don't in my current role, and vice versa. So I think it's about kind of figuring out what you want, what's important to you, what are things you hate, what are things you love, and then kind of asking some of those questions as you're considering a career transition. Like, is this fall more into the things you love column, or does it fall into more of the things you might hate column?
That's right. And, I just want to point out, Dave, your point on, the supervisor in the lab, right? That's a very, very stressful job. And that's not a job you leave at the office, right? When you go home, right? And so, and back to your, question earlier, right? If that's the kind of lifestyle you currently lead in your job, make sure that comes out in the interview, that you're comfortable with that kind of lifestyle. Yeah. I think that'll go a long way towards industry. And, and if you really like being around the clock 24/7, go into manufacturing or supply chain, right? They're stressed all the time. Right, they're really good at that, and if you like to travel a lot, maybe the panelists can talk about what sort of jobs they've had where they've been on the road a lot and what that's like.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in there. I think really it's about it comes back to putting yourself out there, right? You almost you may not know until you try it, right? And you can always go back or change it up again, right? And that's scary. I mean, it's I guess I encourage, if you're interested, take a step, right? I will say in my experience with the business manager or sales role, there is a fair amount of travel, right? You have to make sure that you're there for your customers when they need you, and oftentimes they're, depending on where you are in the region, in the United States, the territories can be quite large. Again, something I didn't know how I would feel about that until I stepped into the role, and absolutely loved it because it was something different all the time. And certainly I didn't have a family at that time yet. So I guess that kind of comes back to, there are still many opportunities and doors that you can knock on when your circumstances might change, right? Where you can be, I will say in marketing, probably most product marketing roles, I would say in our industry these days, they have some flexibility. You can be remote, right? You don't have to live where the headquarters is, for instance, and that gives flexibility in being there for if you have children, if you have pets, right? That you can be there for them, or something happens at school, you're just down the road. That has been, very important in my journey. So.
Allison, sound like you want to say something, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a lot is just perspective of where you came from. With work-life balance, just like Joanna said, it's not like constantly in industry, full giving like 150% all the time. Like, it's so up and down. So, if you have a couple like really intense days or weeks, then it's probably going to be pretty chill after that for a couple weeks. You know what I mean? The one thing it is, I feel like more unpredictable, the workload, than it was in the lab. Because everything is just like so structured in the lab. Like, I mean, yes, there is this super craziness that comes with 24/7 because it just never stops. But your, like week, month, and year are like very well established. But just like, others have mentioned today, it's not, it's just not sustainable. Like, there's no way you could have a job that's insane, like, all the time. Conference season is super busy for us on the industry side. That does get, like, kind of taxing after a while, but it's all, like, very enjoyable work, I'll say, when it's conference work. But it's super, super, super long days. It's very different than when you're coming to attend on your own to learn things. And then, we are a business, like when you're getting close to like a product launch or something, it does get pretty crazy leading up to that. But then it's chill for a while. But also, I'm coming from an inner city safety net hospital where there were like no backups for me, so I was on call like every day for like years, and I think I still get like a little triggered, like I have to understand like nothing is like that level of critical in industry, and I need to like chill out about a lot of stuff.
We all feel that way. If we came from the lab, we're like, this isn't life or death. It's a brochure.
Like,
it's fine.
It's so funny how like everyone from the lab and industry is like that. Like we still can't chill out about that. Like nothing is life or death. Even though your salespeople might treat it like it is.
For service people, it's different. For
service
people in
for
quality
sure,
and
for sure.
manufacturing.
For sure.
For sure. Okay, I think we have time for one more audience question, and then we'll probably release the panel to all of you if you want to ask some individual questions or network.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you, guys. It's been very enlightening. So, in general, I think I have two questions. One is, how do you get your feedback of performance? Like, how is your relationship with your higher-ups, and how do you know you're doing a good job in your different fields? And the second part is, are there any occasions that you have seen that there are some environments that are more toxic than others in the industry, and how do you handle that?
Wow, okay. I'll let anyone take that one.
That's good.
So being my own boss.
How is your boss?
Yeah, my boss can be good. He also can be mean. But I'd say from my business owner perspective, the way I know I'm doing a good job is my clients stay with me and I'm growing my business. Then I must be doing a good job. I have no social media, no website, no nothing. It's all word of mouth. So when I gain new clients, I know that I must have done something good. In terms of areas of toxicness, I would say being able to figure out who the people are that you're going to interact with that are money driven and not patient care driven. Because for me, it's patient care 100% of the time. I'll have my labs eat cost if it helps the patient. Business owners and investors don't like that, but that's my red line. So knowing and being able to figure that out early enough is helpful for my industry. I don't know what a big company would be like in that regard.
I'll just quickly address like one of the issues that, there's going to be toxic people anywhere you go. Like there are toxic people in the hospital, there's toxic people in industry. Like a lot you can't almost do anything about. But you can always like control how you react to it. Trying your best to always ignore it and rise above it, I think, is always the best way to take it. But I did want to talk about like making the most out of like your feedback experience and kind of your one-on-one time with your boss. This was something that like, I don't remember this ever being like something in the hospital setting, but in industry, like feedback is like a really big thing. And documenting positive feedback is like a huge thing. And I'm still not like good at keeping up with this, but if it's everyone needs to really try to work on this, because I see how it works really well for people, especially like when it comes time for your yearly review, then you just like pull up all that feedback and you're like, everyone thinks I'm great, there's the proof, So that's something like I definitely am like working on to do better, but I see people do it so well, and oh my gosh, it benefits them like to no end. And then I also, something that just I never dealt with working in previous jobs. In the industry, you kind of have these like one-on-ones with your boss, and I'm sure you see all sorts of different bosses handle it differently, but I've consistently see that like it falls more on the employee to make the most of those sessions. So I'd really come like with a very clear agenda to your one-on-one sessions with your boss to make sure that you make the most of their time, because they're not, that you're going to get the most out of that situation. Like if you're very proactive about what you need from them, and then they also in turn can see like everything that you're working on. Just don't assume that they ever like know everything. So you really have to like, in industry, you have to be such an advocate for yourself, which I think is like very different than when you're in academia or a hospital setting. I don't know, I just don't remember ever like having to do that. So that's something that like I'm totally working on still.
That's a really important point, Allison. Yeah, on being your own advocate, and I think, and I'll give Johanna the mic in a second, but you know, I think in many cases in industry, there's not, sometimes, rarely, but there's not like a career path handed to you, right? You own your career path, you own your career development. There are people who will be delighted to advise you, to help you along the way, but they're not gonna hand you a map and say, here's, you do this for 2 years and that for 2 years, and here's the next 20 years and what they look like. You have to own that and you have to drive it yourself.
And the same goes for some projects as well, right? Whether it's marketing, well, maybe R&D is a little bit more roadmap, this is the recipe. But I will say on the marketing side, it's, I would say one of the biggest things I've had to learn that's different from the lab is sometimes you are the final say, or you have to make these decisions, right? And there's no one's giving you the guidebook on how to execute on a certain strategy, for instance. So I think learning that, okay, I have the skills, I can make the decision and the confidence to do so. It's really, you know, it's really empowering because you're always, you know, you always have your team, you're always collaborating with multiple team members, but gaining that confidence of, okay, you have the skills to make the decisions is something valuable to learn as well.
And then just to address your question around the toxic workplace, the best time to figure that out is during the interview. So think about it, not just that they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them to figure out if this is a place, an environment, or even, because presumably you'd be interviewing with like your direct superior, try and gauge how that goes, and just look for clues, look for red flags. In the same way that they're going to be looking for red flags in you, you need to look for red flags in them, just to save yourself the heartache. But definitely approach the interview from that perspective that you're interviewing this company and this team.
That's an amazing point, Johanna. And we actually, our time, we're going to wrap up, but I want to grab a thread from what a couple of you said. Johanna, you just made that point about you're interviewing the company too, and right, and you had mentioned here about money versus patient care and knowing what you're getting into. And to me, those both come to threads that I want to stress around. Make sure that your culture, as who you are as an individual, your values align to the values of the company that you're looking into. That's so important. This is going to be your new family for years and years and years. You're going to spend time with these people every day. You're going to have to do things that they ask of you, and you're going to want to make sure those are things that you feel really, really good about every day. So it's really important to make sure the company that you're targeting are ones that are aligned values-wise to yours. And believe me, everybody on the website says they're all about patient care. You got to get to the next level beyond that, right? And you know, and I heard a podcast recently, and I'll leave you with this one thought before we wrap. And the person had suggested that one of the ways to get at that is not to say, what is the culture at your company, right? You can ask that. It's probably a fair question, but you'll get a mix of answers. Some will be kind of canned. One of the really cool questions they suggested to ask is they said, ask the interviewer what type of person should not work here. Ask them who should not work here. And it might throw your interviewer a little bit off their game. They might not be ready for it if they didn't listen to the podcast. But they will. But you might get some really interesting answers, and then that might help you gauge things. Okay, so with that, ADLM and the Corporate Advisory Board and the Society for Young Clinical Laboratorians would once again really like to thank our 5 speakers today. Let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you. You all have such varied backgrounds and experiences, and I think you've provided some really fabulous insights for our audience. So at this time, we'll break, and our speakers will stick around, mill about the room, and if you have any questions you'd like to ask them individually, then please feel free to do so, and we'll be here till about 1:30. Thank you again.